Let's now really start developing our React application and also understand even better the philosophy behind React and JSX. So before we start writing any meaningful code, it's important to understand that what we did before, so in all the sections before this one, was really fundamentally different from what we are going to do now. So what we did before was to write the application in HTML. So we had this HTML file right here, and then we simply added some JavaScript on top of it to make it dynamic. Now with React, it really works the other way around. So in React, everything is JavaScript. So we write our applications as components, which remember are JavaScript functions like this one. And these functions, so these component functions, they contain the component logic, so all the dynamic effects, and also they basically return the HTML for the component. So again, we now flipped what we had before. And so now what we have is like having HTML inside JavaScript now. The only HTML that we have left is this index.html in the public folder. So if we double click here, we see some stuff right there that's not really important. What matters here is that we have this div with the ID of root. So an ID is similar to a class in HTML, but the ID can only be used once, while classes can be used multiple times. Now what matters here is that our entire application will basically be inside of this div. So React will basically take the DOM that we generate from our components and add them right into this div right here. And that's something that I thought was written here as well, but yeah, that doesn't really matter. So let's close this, and this one we can leave open so that we can now actually grab some code from there. Because now basically we need to rebuild the entire interface using React. So using this component and some other components that we're gonna write later. So let's start very small, coming here, also closing up the sidebar. So coming here, and let's start by taking just this header. So copy and then paste the entire header. So starting here with the header all the way to the closing tag. So don't include the container. So just take all this, copy, and then, well, actually let's delete all of this. So we will delete this so that we can actually start our component from complete scratch. So let's give it a save, and then it should become empty here. And so again, don't paste anything yet. Let's write a component from complete scratch. So again, a component in React is simply a React function. So we write function, and then we call this one app. So that's the standard for the first component of all. And what's really important is that we start the function name with an uppercase letter like this uppercase A. So that's the convention of how React will know that this is a component. So no arguments. And then let's open the curly braces here. And then whatever we return from a component is what will become visible on the user interface. So let's paste the HTML that we just wrote, paste that here, and give it a save. And then Prettier should format it like this, at least if you have Prettier working correctly. Now we get this error here, but that's no problem. Let's just understand why this is. So we could have written this entire file here also in index.js. So index.js is the very first JavaScript file that will get loaded. That's why it's also called index. So just like index.html. So you see that here we are importing app from the app.js file, which is what this here means. So if we're importing this, we also need to export it from app.js. So let's do that. So we write export default and then the name of the function. Give it a save. And then here should be at least the very humble beginning of our application. So let's understand what just happened here. So we are returning this thing here from this function, But what is this actually? I mean, if you tried to write this into normal JavaScript outside of React, you would just get an error because this is HTML and JavaScript doesn't understand HTML. So if we open up our v1, so this script that we wrote before, when we created an HTML somewhere down here, we did it as a string, right? And that's because, again, JavaScript doesn't really understand what HTML is. However, the thing is that this is actually not HTML. It looks like HTML, but it is a different syntax, which is called JSX. So JSX is a syntax that React created and which looks indeed very similar to HTML, and that's just so that we can write React components in a way that is familiar to us, because we already know how to write HTML. But under the hood, this syntax here, so this JSX, will then be converted to some JavaScript functions that React understands. Okay? Also, there are actually some differences between HTML and JSX. And the first one is actually class. So class is a reserved word in JavaScript, and so we cannot use it in JSX. So when we write React code, we do not write class, but class name. So let's change that everywhere here. And for now, that's the biggest difference between HTML and JSX. Also, it's very important that you only return one element from each component. So if you tried to also return like this, you would get an error here, and even VS Code would give you this error here immediately. So JSX expressions must have one parent element. So let's get rid of that, and here we go. So first of all, here we have this error. So the page is not being able to load the logo, so this file here. And well, how could it? I mean, we simply said that the source should be logo, but we don't have this file anywhere, right? We have it in our v1 folder, but of course, React doesn't know how to reach into that folder. So what we're going to do is to come here to v1 and then right-click and copy. And now this is where the public folder comes into play. So let's right-click on public and paste. Okay, there it is. And now if we reload the page, there it is. So there is the image. And so basically what this means is that when you specify a file, React will look into the public folder and see if it can find it there. So all the files that should be served on the web page, and that's mainly images, they need to go into this public folder. Now what we also want now here is to get our CSS back, right? Now there are many different ways of using CSS in React, but the easiest way is to simply now copy this file again, and then we can import it also into our application. So this time in the source folder, paste that there and not in the public folder, because this is actually some code that will be included into the application. So for now we can close that again, this one as well. And now what we need to do here is to write import, then quotes, dot, and then slash style.css. Give it a save, and there is our style back. Now we don't have yet the fonts, but the style is indeed back. Let's make it again a bit smaller so we can see everything. Okay, and now let's just worry about the fonts just to get finished here. So again, in our v1 folder, open up index.html, and here we will grab what we have here. So these three links here that came from Google Fonts, remember that, but not our style.css. So the CSS file we do not include in HTML, but as we just did, we include it in JavaScript. So right here. But these ones, we actually need to copy them. Let's close it. And then let's again open up index.html from the public folder. And so this is where we now paste, let's do it right here, our fonts. And now really just to finish, here we have this title which says React app. And so that's exactly what is here. And so let's change that again to Today I Learned. And there it is. Beautiful. So here we don't need all this space. Let's close this. And yeah, so for now, this is what I wanted to do in this lecture. So we built our first component, at least partially, and we got everything to work again and have started transforming our HTML to a JavaScript application, and in particular, a React application. And I know there was a lot of different stuff to do in this lecture, so a lot of stuff to move over from the original HTML and CSS project to the React project. So if any step of the way there was some error for you or something is not working correctly, then as always, please make sure to just ask in the Q&A. So don't give up on the project and instead let's try to solve your issue. And then once everything is working fine, we can continue building the application in the next video.